Welcome to the 37th episode of Tokenizing Everything, our weekly interview series with thought leaders in the blockchain industry. Today's guest is Magnus Jones, Nordic blockchain and innovation lead at EY Tax and Law. Before we begin, I have to mention that all opinions are solely personal and do not reflect the opinion of Amazing Blocks, EY, or any other involved parties. So it's a pleasure to have you here today, Magnus. How are you?
I'm great, Nicolas. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely going to be an interesting episode, as obviously the taxation issue is quite omnipresent in the crypto space right now, right? So I'm really looking forward to today's episode, and I do think that a lot of the listeners and viewers will most likely learn a lot from you. So let's maybe start by you giving a brief intro of who you are and where your background is in regards to the taxation and the crypto space.
Yes, my name is Magnus Jones. So I am located in Oslo in Norway and work for the law firm of EY. So there I have two different roles. One is the innovation role relating to that I used to work within the area of VAT and taxes there as a, you can call it a traditional lawyer, while I also have a role as the Nordic blockchain lead. So it's the combination of new money, new types of taxation, as I've also been working a lot within the area of digital taxations and new reporting schemes, both for companies, but also from the authorities side. So I have a mixed background of the hardcore core tech stuff, while also being deep into the crypto space. So there's definitely very interesting times right now, and what we will see ahead. So that's in brief my background. Myself, I have a background from technology, economics, and also law. So there I have a mixed and diversified background as well.
Perfect. Very interesting. And you also have a very nice background here today in the interview,
yeah,
right?
Actually, it's holiday season still in Norway. So I'm up in the middle of Norway in the mountains here. So quite nice being out hiking today. So cannot complain at all, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely do not need a virtual background, right? So it's a good thing, right? So
Absolutely.
let's maybe start again, diving quickly into your background into the taxation industry, right? Or the tax industry in general. Was there like a moment, back in time where you really gathered that interest in this industry, or what really made you want to pursue a career in this field?
Well, I think it was things being connected towards each other, because outside of my daily work, I've been active within Norwegian Computer Association and other taught membership groups. So things arise and you take 1 + 1 sort of saying and see connections towards others. And with the traditional lawyer mind, one try to, or at least seize challenges that might arise in things. So it was rather in 2014 and 2015 when I started to look a bit more into the crypto space itself, and also specifically in 2015 when Ethereum came up with the possibility of actually executing smart contracts, where I immediately understood that the implications that this technology will come up with will be arised within the legal area, but also in the tax area in some matter, as I clearly understood at that time also that the real potential of this technology is not that we're going to necessarily track a banana from A to B, or a bottle of wine, or something else, but rather that one can transfer a value on different protocols, and hence when you transfer a value, there's also a tax involved. So by that, that's the reason for why we in Norway, but also at EY officially, started to roll this out in 2015, because we clearly saw at that time early on that this will make implications on all of our service offerings, not only from the legal side, but for financial services, from our IT advisory consultancies, but also, of course, as our traditional accountants and auditors, as i.e. when we do bookkeeping and auditing of companies, we at least believed that this technology is not something that's just going to disappear, and hence we need to understand this one in order to be able to execute audits in a professional manner by companies who touch up on this one, either for investment purposes or for just R&D purposes or so on. So that's sort of saying how we started this one out at you can call it a small scale, step by step, but also worked from the very first start close together with authorities, tax authorities, specifically in Norway, where we clearly saw lots of challenges at that time when we had challenges within the core VAT area at that time, whether or not it should be applied or not, etc., and also other parts. So we've been working close together with various different stakeholders there, and we also then saw that this was something where when we in 2015 and 16 and specifically building up on the ICO hype towards 17, when we assisted companies there, we clearly saw that these companies who came to us, they were skilled within the area of blockchain and crypto, and they knew their stuff. But what they didn't knew was the core business structure, the company structure, and also the taxation part there. So lots of the work that we perform within this area is not necessarily core crypto taxation, i.e. should a token be taxed in this way or the other, but also from a company structuring point of view, i.e. we sit down, we set up and say you have a holding company in company A, you have your business in company B, where is the best tax position to be in? So that's also why lots of the advice that we deliver within this industry is not necessarily related core to the crypto part, but our daily bread and butter service offerings. So it's rather down to finding the mix there to find the best corporate position, but also then again being able to talk the same language as the client, and also being able to assist them in so matter that saying, well, the token should not be issued in this way, maybe we should reclassify it in another protocol, maybe we should do it in this way, and ending up by a third way by finding the best balance between the company structure optimization, but also then the token and what is the offering, and also not forgetting about the taxation part of the investors. That's also something that lots of everything from startups to company tends to forget. So it's a quite wide landscape within this area that we touch up on here. So it's been definitely a very interesting journey since the early days in 2015, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you know, one, as I said at the beginning, right, one of the hottest topic in the space right now. I mean, I know so many people in the space that are currently looking, okay, where do I set up my personal holding, these type of structures, right? Where do I potentially move, right? So there, it's quite like a topic that everyone is dealing with in this industry, with especially the tightening regulations. But kind of zooming out for 1 second out of the, let's say, crypto industry in general, obviously the global tax system, you know, there's quite a few, let's say, flaws, right, such as in transparency in regards to where the funds are going and things like this. What, in your opinion, as you've been in this industry for quite some time, will the future of the entire taxation system in the world look like with disruptive technologies enhancing it, or potentially, you know, aspects such as universal basic income coming into play, then hence negating the need of certain taxes potentially? What is your take on the future of taxation in general?
That's a very good and relevant question. And I think what we've seen is when one look into the normal area of taxation, as you say, one has seen that it's smaller countries, banana republics such as Norway in terms of BNP, who has been countries who has been the first movers on taking on new technology. But we also see in countries with not necessarily the highest BNP, such as Portugal, and going into new tax reporting schemes, going digital tax authorities, like also Southern America and other ones such as Russia for monitoring purposes. So I think what we have seen now is in the world that taxation becomes digital, and authorities, they want also more and more data from companies and also private person for that matter of sake. But specifically on the company side, I think we've seen a clear trend that they want to extract data, and they also want to try to have the data live in some kind of way, not necessarily like in Mexico or Russia, where you cannot even choose your ERP system, where the government actually has a wire into your system, but rather that you have reporting schemes such as Spain with SII, where you have to declare your invoices electronically after a couple of days, and so on. So I think we're moving into that landscape. But what we clearly see from working with large entities and also small entities, but also working with governments on this one, is that they don't have the necessarily data points yet to have trained their machine learning algorithms sufficient enough to have the right output, because it's of course a wet hairy dream for any tax officer that you should extract all company data or private data and then find out, do you have challenges within transfer pricing, within VAT, within domestic tax, within international tax. You could cover them all, but that's in theory. We are still not there, but we see a trend towards it. So definitely, in terms of taxation, I think we will move into more of a live real-time monitoring taxation, i.e. when you have large ERP system vendors such as, for example, SAP, where they've had their S4HANA out for quite a few years now, and there you have quite down to a microsecond level live monitoring overview of what's flowing of money and data within the company. And hence, if governments also can have access to that one, I personally believe that that's sort of what we will see for a liquidity matter purposes, both for government side, but also for the company side on things that they should have refunded. So I personally believe that we will see much more of a live data handling in general. And I also think that, sorry, it's just the rest of the guys coming down from the mountains here.
Okay.
I also believe we will see that the merge in and the link towards the blockchain world and the token economy matches perfectly well in the digital tax area, because if you as a government wants to have an overview of transactions, that's sort of the perfect world for you to be able to reconcile something that is onto a ledger, and also something that you can transfer immediately and do it in a more efficient way. So that's also one of the reasons why, when we started early on this one at the group that were deep into the digital taxation area, we understood that this matches perfectly well with what we see coming up in the token economy, not necessarily what we have there today in 2015, 16, 17, or today, sort of saying, but what we see coming up of different services. So it's rather that I'm 100% sure, from a personal point of view, that we will see much more of a digitization area on everything from the private side to companies side. So but in general, I think it would be hard to predict how and when exactly, of course, and how this is, because as you also know, when the world moves into becoming a more decentralized world, that's sort of where the interesting questions arise from a philosophical point of view also. Where should taxes be paid? I.e. company structuring. If you can set up a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, and now we see small steps of a couple of states in the United States allowing for that one. That's sort of then a step in the direction towards that governments need to rethink the whole thing here about, are we from a legal point of view allowed to actually collect the taxes? And if so, who could it be? Others? Are we at least, how should we do this one? And that's sort of the main challenge that I see in the world moving forward today, how to collect the taxes, not out of the system that we have currently today. That's more easy in the way that you can transfer your data files from the ERP system and collect all the necessary data and find errors or not. In also the opposite way that we work a lot on doing analysis and finding upside of things they should be able to deduct or have refunds. But I think that on that side, that's more of the real challenge for any jurisdictions out there today, actually how to collect taxes in how we see the world moves into more and more decentralized operations.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's funny that you mentioned it. I want to a bit later dive into the topic of how can one tax a DAO, right? But since you mentioned that, I'll just take it from now, right? Because there's a lot of aspects, right? The DAO can, through the treasury management, generate income. Potentially, yeah, sure, it could be a DAO LLC in a state like Wyoming, but on the other hand, it could also just be a DAO itself without any legal entity, which is also the case here and there, right? So that's something that's probably going to be really interesting to look at. And also, let's say, if someone acts on behalf of the DAO and receives, let's say, a certain amount from the DAO, is this then for this person a taxable event, or is it just kind of like a bridge, so to say, right, in regards to just executing something for DAO? So what is your take on how kind of the future of taxation within a DAO ecosystem looks like? Do you think that there will be laws in place that will force, so to say, a DAO to be taxed on the income that is generated through the treasury? Let's say there's a venture DAO in that sense, right, that invests into projects and generates income, or other DAOs are focusing on collaboratively governing IP in the form of NFTs. And let's say they fund a research institution, they receive IP back, which is obviously also worth something in that sense when it's a token. So what is your take on the future of this? And what do you, in your personal opinion, think needs to happen in that sense, that we really have a transparent and coherent system in place?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the questions that all authorities out there today are trying to figure out. And I personally see now that a DAO today as is today, is not decentralized. It's some persons that you can link to it. It's always a group, it's always a website that is registered somewhere. There's always you can call it physical links towards persons there. So right now my prediction is, right, if you look into the world of crypto today, from working with governments all over the world, up until now, I haven't seen more than a handful of people of any government who has a really in-depth knowledge within this area, not just claiming they know something about the token or not, but who has in-depth knowledge. So of course, governments all over the world today are struggling to understand ordinary crypto, i.e. buy, sell, buy, hold, sell. So when one throws this one in, I personally don't see, even though it's been discussions around DAOs and everything, and the DeFi, the decentralized finance space, I clearly see that there's not enough knowledge within the authorities to actually be able to provide some laws that will work for this one. So my advice to all of the DAOs out there today is to be cautious, because I personally believe that governments will, and specifically tax governments, will take the shortest route to find someone if they want to tax something. And if the main rule is sort of saying, if there's a capital gain, there's also a tax. And hence they will follow persons down there, and they will find them in an easy way. And we already seen this one sort of saying from the US side on a couple of projects already. So I think where we right now is today is that it's a lack of knowledge, and governments understand if they are to execute a control on this area towards a DAO, they will have to run this case for years because they don't have the sufficient competence to carry it out. And hence, that's why we see it's totally quiet, i.e. in the same way as we saw in 2016 and 17 in the ICO market. Is it legal or not? Yes, it's not legal de facto, but it's still not illegal, hence let's just do it. And then we saw controls coming up on the area, and that's when we see governments actually take they're spending quite a few years on this one, i.e. if you look into the MiCA, the markets in crypto assets proposal for a regulation within the EU now, that's actually to cover the ICO market of 2017, and we're writing 2021 now. So it will take some time. So I think where we are right now, we will see lots of challenges, hurdles. We will see some jurisdictions going hard in on this one if they see that the volumes and the market is growing sufficient within the DeFi world, sufficiently enough to say, well, this is affecting, or this is not just an insignificant amount anymore, or we have to protect the consumers out there, or etc. Then we will see some moves towards this, but I don't think we will see a united legislation or recommendation or a guidance towards how to tax a DAO, because then we need to more look into basic IT infrastructure, conflicts of laws. There's much more to this one than rather just looking into the crypto side in itself. So, but going forward, I think if one understands the system, and if one builds a system where also governments can have, you can call it plug-in in the same way as governments wants to have a wire into an ERP system to watch the data of a company live, then you see all the benefits that the DeFi world has is de facto that one, that you can actually follow all transactions. And that's why we also see investment funds, small investment funds right now at the moment, who we have assisted, and they are moving into this one because they of course see that they can get 6 to 60% interest, which they cannot get in the ordinary world, and that will not last forever. We understand that one, but still down to the transparency element of this one, we clearly see that when governments could go in, they could have a node on a protocol, on a blockchain, follow all transactions. Then it's easy to write a script that could also extract the necessary and correct taxation of it. And of course, one has to understand this one. And I'm not saying that it's just write the script and throw it out and it's done in 50 minutes, because it's down to if you use a DeFi solution, it's quite complex towards how you connect all different protocols towards each other, and how you connect the dApps, and how interest is calculated in what type of way, and etc. So, but I personally believe that we will see a taxation form there in the future, where also governments are running smart contracts on various different protocols. And hence, in that way, they ensure that the tax is extracted. And I think we will see that, sort of saying, the serious actors out there will make then protocols which they allow governments to join in on. And then you, of course, have the basic question down to, well, is this decentralized or not? We don't like governments. This is not what it's for. But one has to understand that one cannot, or at least I believe, we cannot move from a totally, call it totally centralized world overnight into a totally decentralized world. That's just not realistic. So I think the irony, sort of saying, with the whole of this technology is that in order to build the trust of the whole system, what it needs is that in the middle there, we need intermediaries, we need third parties, ironically enough, to monitor this, to control it, to build the trust, to see that you can actually have parties in there who wants to pay their taxes. And of course, on the other separate side, we will have, you can call it a dark market, a black market, a gray market, whatever you want, who's not willing to pay taxes or whatnot. But at least what we see, the majority of people who is into this one who understands this one. They actually want to act in a legal way, and they want to pay their taxes. So that's sort of the challenge now with the chicken and the egg, towards should one do one thing or the other. And as I normally advise all our clients is to, if there's, as mentioned, is a gain, you should also then assume that there's a tax, and one should try to find the link towards the country which it is closest and set off the money towards this one, because there's absolutely a high chance and a high risk that the authorities will come and show up under control in not next month, not necessarily next year, but maybe in a couple of years, when we see the system grows, when we see the whole ecosystem grows, when we see the tools coming up, and when we see third parties are having nice tools, and we already in the ordinary world today of crypto, we have Chainalysis, we have CipherTrace, we have Elliptic, we have CoinFi, etc. So that means that we have traceability companies who do analytics on this one, such as within the DeFi world of Nansen and Dune Analytics, etc. Two Norwegian companies by coincidence also, who is great within this area. So it means that there's close to a full transparency there. And already today we have seen companies, investment funds in Asia, Alameda, etc., who has identified their wallets on the DeFi space and said, well, these are our wallets, these are our transactions. You can follow every single dollar or euro or whatever you take it in, and thereby you can have a full tax transparency. So I think we will move into this one, but it will be a lot of hassle, a lot of fuss, a lot of work, and not the easy ride to move over to this one. But as we touched upon earlier, I think we will see the ordinary taxation system also merging slowly into the world of scripts, i.e. smart contracts in some kind of way, not necessarily on a blockchain that is out there today. It might be, as I personally believe, that the blockchain that will have the highest impact in the world has not still been created yet, but I think we will see steps towards this one, and so on. So I think when you throw on the much hyped central bank digital currencies in addition, that sort of closes the circle around how governments wants to tax things and how they also want to trace things, i.e. by being able to trace tokens by using central bank digital currencies. So I think the link in the whole system there closes pretty good together. And then we also at EY, we believe that we have had a statement saying by 2030, we believe that half of all business contracts in the world will be executed on a smart contract. And by that, we also mean that we think money will become more programmable. And in that way, also we need a taxation element. So I see, of course, challenges on that journey. There will be lots of holes towards this one. There will always be people who is smarter than the authorities. And as we see DeFi solutions popping up now overnight, of course there will be. But I think in general, we will move over to a system which will be much more efficient, much more transparent, and also will provide much more efficiency towards also a liquidity matter, both from the company side, but also the authority side in terms of how it will work. But as mentioned, I don't see a clear streamlined transactions into this area, and I wish I had the architecture to draw up this one, because this is definitely a tough one to work. But yeah, that's some of my views on this one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's still a long way to go, I think, here, as everything is so early, right? And as you mentioned correctly, you know, first of all, it's also crucial that we educate, right, the regulators. And I think at DY you did quite a good job with the Norwegian government, right, through your initiative there with releasing, I think, the first DeFi tax guidance in the world. So props to you to you at this stage. And also, I believe, in regards to transparency, that's something I believe that some regulators sometimes forget, right? That everything is traceable on chain, right? You just have to kind of figure out how you can trace it, but it's not like magic, so to say, right? It's much easier than with cash, right? At that in that sense. So that's something that I always find quite interesting. And also, what you mentioned, I think, is really crucial, that the legacy tax systems kind of transform or adjust to the respective technologies that are emerging, right? That they will be potentially also smart contract based, which is something that here and there I think is neglected to a certain extent, where I don't want to mention any jurisdictions or names, but certain jurisdictions rather try to just implement year-old tax strategies onto this new market, and that's kind of then creating some issues. But at this stage, it kind of makes sense to pose the weekly Be in Crypto special question from the community. And this week's question for you was, which jurisdiction would you describe or say this is a role model for other jurisdictions to follow, if it's even possible and you can say it?
No, we at the EY we have been working with almost all jurisdictions in the world, sort of saying, and as mentioned, there's not much more than a handful of people in if that at all in the various different jurisdictions that actually understands the system and has in that knowledge. But I would say that from being a bit biased, sort of saying, of being a Norwegian, as you mentioned, Norwegian tax authorities, they have been far ahead on this area, and I would like to give them credit, and also others, but specifically them who actually started looking into clustering, i.e., trying to transfer and monitor transactions of crypto transactions. They started with clustering in 2012 and 2013 already. So they were one of the first ones in the world who actually looked into this one. And they have taken a point of view towards this one, that it could be, from a statistical point of view, of course, a small amount, sort of saying, you can call it an insignificant amount if you look into the BNP and all oil money in Norway, etc. But still, they have seen that, well, we could either say that we believe that this will just disappear and go away, or we could conclude with that some parts of this will for sure disappear and go away. And I think they're right there, that among 10,000 X whatever it is out there, we will have quite a few shitcoins that has no value. But still, on the other side, as they have also said, well, one could call, say, for example, Dogecoin a shitcoin that has zero value. But suddenly one could transfer some kind of value into it, because value is only all about trust, and money is about trust. So like we see now, where actually people are starting, for, I would say, my personal opinion, odd reason to trust in Dogecoin, when people are starting to do this, and governments are seeing that stores and companies are accepting it, they also have to understand it. So the Norwegian government has rather taken a point of view towards this one, saying we have to understand it now, because if we want to understand this one in 2, 3, 5 years, it will be much more complex. So it's rather, they've not publicly said put our head down in the rabbit hole, but that's sort of saying what they're actually doing. So they are actually, I would say, the government that is way ahead of others, from what I personally have seen all over the world. So as you mentioned, we have assisted them for almost a year pro bono in terms of issuing guidance also on DeFi taxation. So they issued a rather small guidance, but still they are open to questions. They want people to contact them, and they do not want to stand there with an axe and chop any heads off. They rather want to discuss with the community. They urge them to come up with the challenges because they see it and they want to discuss them, and together they could find solutions. So we have brought lots of our clients to them, where we have discussed it, they have said, well, we have no clear guidance on this one from a world perspective or anything. But in Norway, we believe now that we should tax it in this way. It might be different in another year. We cannot guarantee this one, or just in 6 months or whatever. But at least that gives these actors who are future thinking, forward running entrepreneurs a chance to actually have some predictability in the work that they do compared to other jurisdictions who you cannot get any answers from, and where one bears a high risk that at one day the authorities will carry out the control. Just to state an example, and then sort of saying you could be really screwed. So by that, I also always urge people to think about, be realistic, take the flush test, i.e. if you get the control of your accounts from the authorities, will you flush a bit if they ask questions towards the way you have handled this one? Rather try to think about how would it be taxed if it was a banana instead of a banana coin.
Yeah, definitely. I think that makes sense.
So I would say that definitely Norwegian governments are far ahead, and I would say also in the US governments, there's quite a few persons who has now a great understanding, and also on specific organs such as the Office of Comptroller, who controls the banking industry, etc., who has been very proactive out there now recently for the last 1.5 years in terms of giving statements and giving guidance, etc. So we clearly see this one, and we also see other governments sort of saying in Singapore, etc., who gives good guidance, definitely. And not to forget to mention BaFin and FINMA, and in Germany and Switzerland, who has led the way, sort of saying for years in this landscape. So we clearly see that one, but still from working in different jurisdictions such as Germany and Switzerland, we still see challenges, as presumably you also know. So I would at least give creds to, if you ask me, to these kind of financial authorities there. But from a core tax point of view, it's very different how sort of which hat you're wearing in terms of right now, for example, in Portugal, where there's lower taxes, etc., or easy taxes on cryptos. Is that a good thing or a bad thing if you just close your eyes and say, hey, we should not have any taxation on crypto because that's the most easiest way, and let's try to build the BNP? So if you have to, as government, then control it at some point and of level, and I believe they will have to, then they have a challenge again to figure out how does this work. So I rather prefer the governments where one can discuss things with them, and where one can create predictabilities, and where they're open to sort of look at this one at a shorter time frame than say this is something that we can just write in stone, because they see this is a dynamic, evolving landscape that will evolve for years. So I give creds to Norwegian authorities, and also specifically then BaFin, FINMA, the authorities in Germany, Switzerland, and also parts of the US ones, and also some in Asia that has given good guidance, I would say. That's but for that second matter, we have had good conversations with authorities in Sweden, in UK, other places also. But still, it's like in general, there's not that many authorities out there today who has actually publicly gone out and said, we go and look into the DeFi space. That's way ahead of others. So hence, that's why I would give my creds to the Norwegian ones.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. What I really like is, as you mentioned, right, that they actually encourage you to come forward and have an open discussion with them, right? Which then also, kind of takes away kind of the fear potentially of some of these entrepreneurs, right? That fear that when they come forward that they will get in trouble, right? And I think then this kind of then also fosters like an open discussion where you can find a common ground for it, which is beneficial for everyone, and also then does not necessarily harm innovation in that sense. Before we come to the final question of the interview, just a quick question, since we have been in this NFT hype Probably you saw this coming. Is there anything that you would say that NFTs change in regards to taxation, or do they kind of provide further, let's say, obstacles? Because I mean, obviously, when we talk about an NFT for IP, I mean, that's an entire rabbit hole for itself, but just generally from a taxation standpoint and maybe the convergence of NFTs and DeFi, does this change anything, or in your opinion, not too much?
Yeah, of course, NFTs adds complexity towards it. And that's down to sort of saying also from a point of view on in the countries where people have wealth tax, for example, where you have to report all your assets by the 31st of December, and you have a small percentage that is paid in wealth tax. And that's down to say, if you buy an NFT, what is actually the value of the NFT, or what is the value of the Rembrandt painting that you have on your wall, or the Warhol painting, and that's down to then the classification of, well, you have bought an NFT, i.e. by definition it's unique, it's a one-off. What is the market value? Well, is this that you could have a fixed offer for it, and that should be sufficient? Should you have been able to provide an anonymous offer for it, and that's sort of the tax value? Should it be the value that you bought a Beeple for $1,000? Why now, by nature, it's worth $5 million? What is the value? And that's sort of the challenges that we have seen and what we have discussed with various authorities towards, call it normal people who has been out there early and by coincidence either just received an NFT from a friend by fun, or just acquired one, and suddenly overnight it appears to have a higher value. So that, of course, raises challenges towards the valuation process of what is actually the asset worth. So that's just one part that we have had various discussions on with authorities, and where we have received quite good clarity also in different jurisdictions, and different jurisdictions treat this one in different ways. So there's not just one way solution here. So that's one area. But also, of course, NFTs is down to, I would personally say that I believe that the majority of people who has bought NFTs has no clue what an NFT is actually. It's rather that people believe they have received a JPEG in the wallet, and they try desperately to find, where is it? It hasn't been transferred to me, etc. We've seen quite a few examples of that one, and that's down to not trying to make a fool out of anyone, but that's just down to trying to illustrate where the whole ecosystem is today. It's not being fully developed. It's not being easy enough for either the investor, the buyer, the private person, the VCs to go in and buy and understand this one. So I think for tax purposes, that they're also, it's understanding the whole process of what have you actually bought. Have you bought the IP rights to it? Probably not. Where is the ownership of it? How should it be taxed for accounting purposes if you are a company who has acquired something of a high value? So it's down to classification question, and that's down to what I normally say. It's all about, regardless of what type of crypto it is, whether or not it's, you can call it a shitcoin, or if it's a DeFi protocol, or if it's an NFT or something else, it's down to the classification of the attributes of the token. So one has to pour that cup over the table, get all the elements out, look into what is this specifically, then figure out based upon that classification in that specific instance, and say, well, in this instance, it should be treated in this way and that way and taxed in that way. So it's I would say it's a tough nut with the NFTs, because you have to figure out, has you bought it and acquired as a private person or as a company? How is it situated? Do you have the IP rights in addition towards it? Have you sold it? Have you not? Have you stored it, etc.? By figuring out all of these things, one can, I would say, easily find out how to tax it. But the challenge is that one cannot just say NFTs should be taxed in way A, B, or C. It's all by individuals that you have to look into. So yes, to answer your question, I would say NFTs has definitely added some extra elements towards this one. And also from the point of view in terms of deduction, if you are entitled to receive a deduction for a tax purposes, that's something that people quite often tend to forget, i.e. there's of course lots of fraud out there in the world, whether or not that's DeFi or NFTs or whatever, lots of rug pulls and scams, whatever. And that's not down to that I'm saying that giving that the whole market is a scam, definitely not. But where there's a new market and where there's fast money, there will always be scammers. So, and also people who has not understand what they have acquired. And by that reason, we also see that lots of people need advice in terms of being able to classify and verify to authorities that you have bought an NFT, but you have been scammed, you're not received it, it's still not on my wallet, I've not access to it, all of these things. So that's also challenges within this ecosystem that we clearly see that has arisen in addition to the traditional ones. So I would not specifically, you can call it blame the NFTs for creating a lot of noise, but I would rather say that the ecosystem has of course evolved around it and kept and created quite a few more challenges around the area, but that's not NFT specifically. It's down to the DeFi world as well, where there's quite a few interesting elements that one could look into for tax purposes, i.e. just in the same way as you look into two large protocols such as Aave and Compound in terms of how they pay interest and how you classify it, how you should report it in, and how you should tax it. That's two different ways by two solutions that is close, similar to each other on the paper, but in practice, it's two different things. So that's down to, as mentioned also, pour the token out from the cup on the table, pull all the elements from each other and figure it out how to tax it. So yeah, we have had quite a few interesting discussions with authorities all over the world where we have set out normally just a half an hour, but we have discussed it for 3 hours because it's basic questions, but still it's principal questions that also the authorities are interested in. So yeah, I think we have just seen the start on this one, as I personally also believe that we will see a world that will evolve in the meta space in that kind of way, but also within gaming, which I personally believe is an industry that has been forgotten a bit, where we see now more and more large entities moving into. We see large old corporations such as Atari coming into this one again, bringing into virtual assets in this world. We see also clothing producers such as Louis Vuitton, such as others there who put out virtual clothing in this world, put it into an NFT, put it down to that this is something that you can wear to a game, bring it over to another. And in this world where we see lots of the virtual worlds being moved into actually assets that has a real value, that's where we see challenges arises, because the average user of this one is youngsters de facto who doesn't think about tax at all. I.e., if you transfer a skin from me to you and you don't think about that, oh, you received the skin as an NFT, as a token, i.e. the token is supposed to be taxed in a totally different way than if one were to have at a costume party and I transferred a physical sweater of a skin to you, so you could wear it to a party compared to a virtual one. So also these challenges we clearly see will arise more and more in the future, where we see also a great type of value is being created. Not only that it's insignificant anymore, but if you look into games such as, for example, Axie Infinity, who has had a real boost now lately within the world of crypto, getting payments, and also the NFT world there. And people are holding assets that suddenly overnight could arise a lot in value, and you transfer it, and you forget that it's a token, i.e. you transfer it from one wallet that you control to another one which you don't control. And the main rule there is that it's a liquidation, you should pay then normally a capital gain on this one, and people tend to forget it. So I personally see that the hassle sort of thing that we believe that we see today and the challenges is nothing compared to how fast the world moves forward within the virtual meta space and also the gaming space, and what we'll see coming up just in a couple of years. So I personally believe that we will see lots of reopening cases where authorities in 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years will reopen cases, go back in time because it's on the ledger. They will be able to trace down your wallets, whether or not you can call it it's Soda Anonymous or whatever. They will find it. They're able to do this one, and we will see lots of noise being created there. So definitely, I believe that the virtual world will create much more, you can see, challenges compared to what NFTs has currently done today. That's just peanuts in so matter.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's funny that you mentioned the metaverse. I mean, that's kind of like an entire aspect for itself, right? Where we could have a conversation in regards to the taxation there, as there's these sophisticated economic systems emerging there. So yeah, I think it's a great point that you mentioned. It's not so much only about digital art, but actually these sort of in-game assets, right? So yeah, let's move forward to the last question, right? And I mean, you've already, I think, given us a very good overview and a very good lesson in regards to the taxation. So I definitely appreciate your insights already. But as the last question, as I always ask my guests, where do you see blockchain in 10 years from now? And you don't have to talk about taxes, no worries.
No, I think, of course, 10 years is a long time. And if one look into the fact, though, of the world of smart contracts has not existed for 10 years yet, it's just created, be there for 6 years almost. So, of course, that's hard to predict. But in general, I would say that I see the world of blockchain and crypto being implemented into ERP systems, into entity systems, into accounting systems, and into payment systems in a way that it should be. And that, by that I mean that it should be implemented just as a protocol, just as an infrastructure layer, because I think that's sort of the challenge that the whole industry and the landscape has had for years. That's down to, unfortunately, that all the journalists out there in 2016 and 17 and so on, they have sort of made up their use cases of this technology based upon that you could trace something from A to B, and it's 100% trustworthy and it's transparent. That's sort of saying the use case. But the real use case is when you can transfer value and have that one into the systems. So I personally believe that one will just transfer it and implement it as a protocol into your existing ERP systems and operating systems, etc. It's not some sparkling solution that should be running at the Cobalt machine in the corner of your office. It's rather something that should be there as a layer, just in the same way as you don't care about the TCP IP protocol when you're on internet on or how the HTTP protocol works when you're on the internet, or any other protocol in some matter. You just use it, and in the same way, blockchains also are there to just be used as a protocol, as infrastructure layer connected towards other IT infrastructure to make efficiencies. So you as a user, well, you shouldn't care about how the blockchain works, sort of saying. So I believe that it will be integrated in a totally different way. We, as I normally say, we're still at a level where people are saying, oh, are you doing a blockchain solution? Wow, that's cool. And if one just rewinds back to 2015, 16, where people are doing cloud solution, oh my God, are you doing a cloud solution? People are not running around saying now, oh my God, you're doing a AWS cloud solutions. That's cool, man. No, you just use the cloud. In the same way, I think in 10 years, I'm 100% sure that we just use the blockchain without using the terminology of blockchain itself. So I foresee also in the same way as when we work with payment infrastructure providers also. Of course, all of these parties, they are preparing their systems to be able to transfer a value. So say if I wanted to transfer a Norwegian crown from Norway to you in Germany, and that should be taken out in euros, that cannot be possible today, because I would have to pay 15 euros in fees to get that 1 Norwegian crowns to you. So I think on the other side, we see the same things as the banks. On the back end side, if I go to my bank and say I want to transfer 1 Norwegian crown to Nicolas, then they could transfer a Dogecoin for that sake, exchange that Norwegian crown into Dogecoin, transfer that one over, exchange it into euro, and maybe it would not be 1 Norwegian crown, but it could be 0.8, 0.7 or whatever. That's much better today compared to paying 15 euros in addition. So I think these kind of things where consumers and entities will not necessarily see the technology at all, you will just use it. It will be lots of swaps on the backside. And I think within 10 years, I'm pretty convinced that the decentralized world, and by that I mean the DeFi space in the world, that it's not necessarily out of the solutions that are out there today, i.e. the protocols that are out there today, but the mechanisms of DeFi. I am personally 100% convinced that that's the mechanisms of the future of finance. So I think we will see lots of back-end solutions running on that one without you as the consumer understanding it. And I also believe that the whole buildup of this community will take some time. And as mentioned, I think we will have to have the ironic side of having third parties there as an intermediary. So say right now, it's way too difficult for the average Joe to go out and buy ordinary crypto, to store it and sell it. It's de facto too hard for an average person to do it. And if you look into that DeFi protocol solutions, that's way too advanced for anyone to keep control of. So my prediction is not necessarily in a 10-year frame, but rather in, say, 3 to 5 year frame. I would say my prediction there is that we'll see more and more exchanges going into providing safe services where you have an insurance, where they can buy the DeFi solutions that you want to do it, i.e. in the same way today, if you want to buy a derivative in the ordinary world, an average Joe doesn't go out there in the market and buy it directly from a broker in Frankfurt or in London or in New York. It goes to a broker who is licensed, who has an insurance, who can predict some trust towards this one. And I think that's what the market needs here. So I clearly see a huge market for players such as exchanges who can offer these type of services, take a small fee, and I'm pretty sure that, yeah, me myself, if I could, instead of going into MetaMask and going that way into buying some kind of DeFi product, if I could go to an exchange and say, well, you guys, you can have 2%, 4%, 6%, whatever off that one, but you also have an insurance for me. So you cover it, it's safe stored there, it's secure. I would do it. I would personally do it. So I clearly see that that market is also coming up, that we will see a much more swifter, easier, transparent way for the average Joe and the consumers and the investors to interact with crypto. So I think we will see lots of other user interfaces. But again, that's my 3 to 5 years perspective. So it's hard to say then in 10 years whether or not we see the trend already that decentralized exchanges are taking over volumes from decentralized exchanges. And i.e. that's also why the decentralized exchanges are buying into governance tokens to try to be there to control the decentralized platforms. So my prediction is within 10 years, we will see lots of decentralized platforms. I think we will see data marketplaces in a totally different ways, build up on that token structure, build up on a structure where one trades in a totally different way that one do today. So also at EY, we clearly see that in everything within a supply chain, we see D in everything. We see decentralized storages, we see decentralized operations, we see decentralized transportations, we see a totally different flow of data. So that's also what I see in 10 years, a perspective here, where things are dealt with in a totally different way. Data is shared in a totally different way that we have today. Data is valued. You can sell small data points, both as a company, as a private person. And I think the basis of that one will be built up on the structure of what we have in blockchain and DLT solutions today, but it's very hard to predict whether or not, if you take into consideration, and this is a whole new all the podcasts sort of saying on the quantum computing thing and how that will affect the whole thing. So I'm not saying necessarily that in 10 years we will see a blockchain that is out there today that is safe and secure enough for being able to handle IT infrastructure world in 10 years. But I personally believe that we will see the mechanisms of what we have today, as mentioned, in the decentralized world, in the DeFi world, and what we have currently today that will be there, but it might be on a different IT infrastructure in some matter. So my prediction for that one is sort of I would say parts of the technology that we have today will still be around. My personal prediction is that Bitcoin will also be around. That's also normally a question that I receive. Will it disappear or not? And also in 10 years, I think we will see that central bank digital currencies will have been issued. But still, it's a long way before we see interoperability between these ones from country to country. So I think within 10 years, we have just seen the start of interoperability between central bank digital currencies across jurisdictions. And I also believe that we will still have you can call it a separate crypto market on the side. So I clearly don't see all the 10,000 shitcoins out there today, definitely not, but I see a market out there for, you can call it ordinary crypto on the side in addition. So I see that the world has evolved into a much more efficient way, that we use smart contracts in a totally different way, being able to program our transactions, specifically know to our children that if you receive this money, this can only be used to buy a school book or a milk, not to spend it on a game or a Coke. And it's in that way I see that money is being programmable in a totally different way that it is today. So my prediction 10 years is that you control your money in a whole different way than you do today. You can set it up for specific purposes. And as I also normally say, that if one look into the macro perspective of this one, that I personally foresee a totally economic chaos in the years to come. And that's not down to necessarily a pandemic or that you see political issues, but you see all of these things connected together. In addition to that, you have private actors pushing out the token economy. You have also large serious entities. You have payment providers pushing into it. You have governments. You have tax authorities. You have also then central banks. All of these parties pushing this together and trying to merge it into the fiat world, the ordinary money world. That's sort of thing where I see lots of complexity. So I personally believe that in 10 years, we'll still have fiat around, but we will also have cryptos. And I think we will see that crypto has moved into a much more streamlined version where you and me use this in a totally different way. We use communication channels, messenger services, where the only thing we need to take into consideration is that I want to transfer a certain asset from me to you, and you will receive it in the most swift and efficient way, close to free. So yeah, that's a long answer, but some of my prediction from a 10-year perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Magnus. I mean, you definitely win the first prize, I think, out of all the 36 prior episodes. This was the most detailed answer to this question, so really appreciate it. I think you covered all the different aspects, along the life cycle, whether it is the CBDC side, whether it is the intuitive UI UX that is needed, whether it is the aspect which is always quite. I think everyone that understands blockchain knows this, that people will not have to understand blockchain itself necessarily. Only the blockchain nerds like us may understand it, right? So yeah, I think definitely a very good answer. And also I think what you mentioned in regards to controlling, any form of value exchange much more, and actually having much more transparency in that regard, will definitely, it may not make the kids happy if the parents can say, can control where the money is going, but it definitely can bring a lot of value. So thanks, Magnus, so much. It was a very interesting episode, and I don't want to keep you too long. We kind of went longer than expected, right? But I see the sun is coming out, so I wish you a great day, and it was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you a lot, Nicolas. It was a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for having me on. So I will move out in the great weather now and have an Aperol and relax now further. So thanks a lot, Nicolas. A pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, and enjoy the rest of your holidays. So, and to our listeners, as always, if you have any questions or maybe from a business perspective, you want to tap into the topic of taxation and crypto, I'm sure you can reach out to Magnus and his team. And on the other hand, if you have any other questions in regards to tokenization, blockchain in general, you can always reach out to myself through my social media channels. Other than that, I wish you all a pleasant day and see you guys next week. Thank you.